Welcome to Friday morning, the end of Easter week, as it is. A wonderful celebration of Easter a few days ago. Trusting that we are still in that energy. We've got about 40 days of Easter as well to really revisit the story of the resurrection and this gift of divine love and peace. And so as we come into our devotion today, we do so as usual, mindful of all God's love for us and the ways in which we are being called to open ourselves more and more to see what God is doing with us and in us and through us, and to make an effort to grow and to become what God intends for us to be. So we come then into this space and remember that our theme for this week has been meeting the Savior in between worlds. And so we want to hold that idea of God's intention for us as we now prepare ourselves to go into our time of meditation and stillness as we seek to embrace this gift of love that is ours. So today, Friday, I invite you now into a place of peace, place of stillness. I invite you to open your heart to just visualize your whole heart space just opening up. We live in a world where there's such fear and such concern about who will attack us in one way or another that we live closed. I was reflecting recently on the idea of the fact that we live as small selves because we are afraid to be our grand self, because persons are so abusive and they're so easy to exploit us that we contract ourselves, and we oftentimes don't have a place where we can be our full self. And so I want to invite you this morning to be your full self, to imagine that there's a little self, a little miniature version of you within. But that miniature version is really greater and grander than the self you see in the mirror. And so I want to invite you to just, in this safe space, just to allow that self to grow, to perceive that self as expanding and expanding until it goes beyond you, until it fills the whole space where you're in. And just feel what it feels like to be that grand self. And get used to it, because this is who you are. This is who God made you to be. Why don't you just stay in this space as you go through this devotion, just feeling that sense of being larger than life, being full. The kind of place that Jesus would have been when he said, I and the Father are one. And just repeat those words of Jesus as though they were your words. I and the Father are one. Feel that sense of oneness with the all that is. And just allow it. Allow it to be there. God is spirit. And those who worship God must worship God in spirit and in truth. Jesus said, I have said these things to you to keep you from stumbling. They will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, an hour is coming when those who kill you will think that by doing so they are offering worship to God. And they will do this because they have not known the Father or me. But I have said these things to you so that when their hour comes, you may remember that I told you about them. I did not say these things to you from the beginning because I was with you. But now I am going to him who sent me. Yet none of you asked me, where are you going? But because I have said these things to you, sorrow has filled your hearts. Sorrow has filled your hearts. The idea of saying farewell is such a challenge for humanity. We see it here with Jesus and his disciples. He is, in a sense, informing them of his own departure. And there's this sorrow. Even though he says that he is going away and he's going to prepare a place for them, there's still this sorrow. It is rare when you come across someone who faces death joyously. I had the privilege of ministering to a young woman recently who was suffering from a terminal disease. And I perhaps should not even say that she was suffering, because She really wasn't. Her body was being attacked, but she was in joy. And it wasn't a pretend joy, it was a deep joy. And it was catching. It affected everyone that was around her. It was such a joy to be in her presence. And to realize that she had discovered something important. Jesus discovered something important as well. As a matter of fact, he probably never forgot the truth that he had come from God and he was going to God. Through the millennia, we have heard so many ideas and concepts about God and what happens beyond death. And for the most part, a great deal of it is frightening. And that's what we have fed each other. Fear. Fear. I remember as a child dreading the season of Advent. Because in those days they would always preach on the 4 last things. Death, judgment, heaven, and hell. And I would always dread it because it was such a morbid sentiment. And this would be Sundays before Christmas. And I always wondered why they chose to do that. The whole equating of the coming of the Savior with death and judgment. But Jesus offers us a grander picture. Jesus offers us an invitation to be with Him. And I don't think that we have promoted this invitation as much as we could have. Oftentimes we've done it from a very negative place. It's been a fear tactic. Even the thief at the crucifixion had a better experience than many of us do, because there he was in his own situation, and there's Jesus saying, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." I'm sure that man would have closed his eyes with a greater sense of comfort and assurance than many of us do today. The disciples became sorrowful because they too understood that to be the end. But there's no reason for you and I to be sorrowful, because we have heard the testimony of the resurrection. And over these centuries, men and women of faith have delved deeply into the realm of spirit. They have encountered guides. They've encountered guardians. They've encountered beings other than what we would see in the physical realm. They've received messages and visions. But many of these messages and visions have never really reached the wider church. But we need to hear these messages. We need to go into our bookstores and on Amazon and other places and buy some of these books of saints. Bernard of Clairvaux, a saint who just spoke of love. He was so immersed in love of God. Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Thomas Merton. It's not just the scriptures, friends. There are men and women of faith who've written, who share their experiences, who share their encounters with Spirit, and who tell us firsthand, unlike scriptures which we're not even sure who actually wrote them. But we have records of men and women who have put themselves out in order to be able to perceive the love of God and the depth of God's presence. Men and women who have looked beyond the veil. And in recent times, ordinary folks who've had near-death experiences and have found themselves moving towards the light and having that tremendous sense of warmth and being welcomed and being embraced, to the extent that many of them didn't want to come back into this tribulation, this great tribulation according to Revelation 7:9 onwards. They wanted to stay, but they were told, it's not your time yet, go back. And many of them have come back and they have told their stories, not initially because they were skeptical that people might think that they were crazy, but more and more, as more and more persons have the experience, individuals are beginning to share. We can't dismiss these stories. We can't dismiss these experiences. Because the God that I know, the God that I serve, is a God that is forever revealing that self to humanity. And God is revealing God's self to humanity in ways that humanity can receive it. And the ways in which we can receive things today would be far different from the way in which persons could have received things 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. We've evolved. We've expanded in our intelligence. We've expanded in our concepts that we have received from visions and from dreams. Concepts that have taken us into this technological world. Why is it so unbelievable that we could be receiving new ways of understanding God? If we have come to a place where we can understand the makeup of nature of life, even moving beyond atoms and molecules and going into quantum areas, using words that few people understand the meaning of. But there are those among us who talk about it as though it is just a basic everyday language. If we can embrace what they're doing and see that because of their evolution or our evolution as a species, they're able to embrace this new information. Why is it so difficult to accept that God is revealing God's self to humanity in new ways? In ways that far outstrip the ways of old. There is the evidence around us, and we need to accept it. We can't close our eyes to it. We've got to accept it. We can't bury our heads in the sand. We can't say God is changeless and ignore everything. Because while God is changeless, and that is perfectly true, my understanding of God must change. Because I am not God, so I can't be changeless. Jesus tries to help his disciples to understand the more. But they were so much clinging on to what they would have known. Let us see their example. Let us see how they too, at a point in time, moved beyond where they were. And they embraced the more. More and more persons are awakening to the reality that this is just a passing whim. It's a place of tribulation and trial and temptation and struggle, yes, but it isn't meaningless. It is lessons to be learned. So we learn the lessons and we're out of this place. We deliver what we've come to deliver and we're out of this place when the work is done. We don't leave prematurely. That's not in the plan. But we leave when the work is done. But we know we leave. We've seen so many before us leave. We know we leave. Perhaps it is time for us to really embrace what is behind that veil and understand it with greater clarity and greater understanding. Because we can't live by the old paradigm much longer. We have to embrace the new. May God grant us the wisdom to be open. As I invited you at the beginning of this devotion to be open, I know we can't journey out there yet in that full openness. So during the singing of this next hymn, I invite you to bring yourself back as far as you desire, as far as you can handle. But do so with the awareness that that little self that you think you are isn't all of who you are.